Hey, boss. Okay.
I said I'm fine.
Me to bed, see you in the morning with the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it, and we lost it.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me.
And welcome to another episode of More Than Therapy. Today, we are diving into a story that beautifully illustrates how humor and creativity can serve as powerful tools for healing and self discovery. Our guest, Matthew Check, is a man of many, many layers, a talented musician, a Jewish educator, and an author of a new memoir, What Would Philip Roth Do? Matthew's book finds comedy and clarity amidst chaos, and today he's here to open up about his own journey, the complicated relationship he had with alcohol, and the sobering, morning after moment involving a mountain of toilet paper that finally forced him to face the man in the mirror. Thinking about a Michael Jackson song. Hold on. In our conversation, we'll explore how humor became a bridge between pain and acceptance, the vital role of music in helping him reconnect with his true self, and how his faith and creative expression ultimately led him to a place of balance and self forgiveness. Matthew's story is proof that you can own your mess, laugh through the wreckage, and create your way out of the darkest chapters. Get ready for a conversation that is funny, raw, and deeply meaningful. Please welcome to the show, Matthew Check.
Christopher, thank you so much for having me. That was a great introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. You wrote it.
I forgot about the
All right.
toilet paper part, but that's great.
Indeed, indeed. Matthew, you're a musician and an author. I used to be a musician. Now I call myself an author. But I guess I'm going to go back to music because it's calling me. And I think I'm depressed because I'm not doing it anymore.
What did you play? What instrument do you play?
I'm a programmer, producer, but we would
Okay.
say like music. We call them drum pads that hold the notes or hold the instruments.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, I can play the guitar a wee bit, piano a wee bit, but it's
Okay.
mainly drum programming. So
Very
that's what
cool.
that is. There was a point where you realized your humor was less of a tool for connection and more of a shield or a distraction from your own pain, especially concerning alcohol. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I think that when you drink and you're drinking and drinking and you live your life drinking, you're in a lot of denial about how you are and how you show up in life. And I lived that way for many years, and I think that um, in the early days of my sobriety, it was very difficult for me in the beginning to talk about um, what I had been through, having drank for so many years. And humor really helped me find a way to talk about it. And I found early on in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that alcoholics are really good at laughing at themselves and finding a way to laugh, to finding the humor in the experiences. And I think to a what you might call a civilian, like somebody who's not in recovery, if they were to hear an alcoholic talk to a room full of people so openly about an incident, it would seem so shocking. Like, how could you say such a thing out loud, right? Um, but when you're in a room with a bunch of people who have done the exact same shit that you've done, it's hilarious. And it opens you up. You get to laugh at these dark parts of your life. You get to cry with these dark parts of your life, right? You get to really like own it. You know what I mean? You get to be real and authentic with other people. It's kind of like being on a boat. It's kind of like being a survivor of a shipwreck, and you all know what it's like to be on that boat trying to get across a sea or an ocean. Um, and humor, Christopher, is very much part of that story. Humor really is a healing tool in recovery, at least in my experience with recovery. And humor is a huge part of the book. I wouldn't necessarily say it's like an exclusive tool for like the alcoholic part of like my story, so to speak, because I think the humor is just part of like who I am. I grew up in a family where there was a lot of fun, a lot of funny, a lot of comedy, right? A lot of jokes, so to speak. So that's very much part of like my own personal DNA. But it's definitely a tool in recovery. So that's a really great way to get started, I think. Thank you for bringing that up, actually.
Yes, I laugh all the time. It's to me, it's a healing. You know what I'm saying? It allows. Sometimes it's the coping mechanism to mask the tears or the pain behind what's really going on.
Right, right.
In a situation and be like, oh, that's so inappropriate. But yeah, as though it may be inappropriate in the context of things, when we zoom out, it's allowing us to stabilize enough for us to have those hard conversations and those hard breakthroughs in regard to the work that we must do. So I get it. I get it. I get it.
Now I think that also, so there's a distinction in my mind. Like if you know anybody, and I'm guilty of this. I go through cycles like this. I often put myself down and I laugh at myself. And I'll tell a story that's kind of self-deprecating, right? Um, and there's a really fine line between like being funny and laughing at yourself and putting yourself down, right? Um, and if you're really kind of like paying attention and you pay attention to these types of things, you might notice that some people have a pattern of doing that. Either they're like all ego or like they're no ego. You know what I mean? And so I think that, so the humor in my book, I'll bring it back to the book. The humor in my book is a very self-deprecating Jewish brand of humor. Um, and it really serves a great purpose in the book because it allows me to talk about my challenges and my pain and disappointment and things not working out. And it really just allowed me to kind of have fun with it. You know what I mean? But when you're out in the world and you're constantly putting yourself down and you're self-deprecating, that's a little bit of a different there's something else going on there, if that makes sense. So in my mind, there's a little bit of a distinction between like humor in the artistic sense and then humor like when you're out there like in the world, just like being yourself. You know what I mean? Does that make sense,
Oh, I do.
Christopher?
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I do. And in my writings and my interactions with others. So yes, I can totally resonate with that. You mentioned create your way out. Can you walk us through the process of writing? What would Philip Roth do? And how did the act of turning the chaos and vulnerability of your past into a structured narrative become an essential part of your healing rather just a recounting of events?
Ugh, what a great question. So you use the word healing. Um, there's a lot of stories in the book that I needed healing from. Um, or maybe not even healing, but let's just say like coming full circle in a narrative or coming to grips with like what had happened to me or just kind of like growing up and something completes a cycle in your life, like a relationship with my father. Let's see what else. Alcoholism, obviously, which I do not become sober in the book, but it's my drinking and the things that happen to me because of drinking is right there in the book, right? There's obviously a younger version of myself as a drunk. Relationships that don't work out, particularly one love interest. Um, a cycle of songwriting that came to an end by the end of the book that was very much wrapped up in like uh, this love of a woman who wouldn't love me back, right? And the end of the songwriting cycle was really about the fact that we weren't going to be together. So that was really hard for me also. Um, so I think that those. Oh, and also a little bit of this disappointment around the early part of my career, just not like life as an adult, just not being exactly what I was hoping it was going to be, which is part of growing up. I think everybody kind of goes through that. I think most adults that are adulting in their 20s, especially in our generation, our generation. It's a tough thing to say. I'm 45, so I'll just speak personally. When I was in my 20s and I finally got out of graduate school and I got that piece of paper and I got my first job, like I was not happy, and I was like, "This is what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life. Screw this!" Like that was how I reacted to it, right? So a couple of those narratives um, really were in my head and coming out on the page when I took this memoir writing class in 2014. I was in my early 30s and I was single and newly sober. And for some reason, just at the time of my life, I was just super motivated. I really just wanted to write about myself and about what I had been through. Um, and the woman who ended up being my editor for the book, she was the person who was teaching this course, and she really pulled out of me these different narratives. I really thought in the beginning it was going to be this book that was about like my songwriting and falling in love with this woman and being Jewish and moving to New York. Um, and by the time we really got into writing the book, it just became about so much more. It became about like my relationship with my parents. It became about um, the early escapades of my life in New York City in my 20s. And it became about, the years before I got sober. Because like what ended up happening is as you're writing these scenes, you talked about like how did you just like how did it become a narrative? Because all of those parts that I just mentioned were really part of like a whole story that really did happen to me. And I just needed somebody to show me how to tell that story. Um, and I'm really, grateful that I met an editor that I really trusted so much with everything to allow me, to just help me like write the story. You know what I mean? And so just to circle back, it wasn't written intentionally, strangely. It really happened organically. I wrote like these little vignettes. I didn't think anything was going to become of it. I decided to hire the woman who was teaching this class, and she became my editor. And she really got my humor, and she really liked me, and I liked her. And we wrote the book together over the course of 3 years over Skype. Remember Skype? It was like 2014, so it was before WhatsApp and everything, and there was no Zoom yet, right? So we wrote the book over Skype on my lunch breaks from work, and she was living in Bolivia at the time. So I went down to Bolivia for 3 weeks to meet her and her husband. I did like a little writing retreat trip. And I'm really grateful that I met her. Like it really became this amazing adventure. And yeah, I'm just really grateful that, for the experience. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. I wish I had that in my life. As a Jewish educator, how did the traditions, stories, or community aspect of your faith either complicate or ultimately aid your path toward recovery and finding balance? And was there a specific teaching or text that resonated with your journey?
Really great question. My relationship with Judaism is much more complicated in sobriety. I would actually argue that I kind of lost my religion when I got sober. And that's because I had to really redefine what a higher power was to me when I stopped drinking. And I had to admit to myself that I had, a piece of paper from graduate school saying I was a Jewish educator. And I can read the Bible and I can read the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew. I can translate it for you. I've been to Israel multiple times. I've like spent time in multiple uh, types of synagogues, Orthodox, conservative, reform, my whole life, right? Um, I teach classes in different types of Judaism, but I couldn't tell you who God was when I got sober. I couldn't tell you who God was, not the Jewish God that I had been brought up on. I had to really think about it. Um, and ultimately, where I ended up, to be honest, and I'm really open about this. Some people, I'm surprised that some people still think that this is like provocative, but I really kind of, when it comes to Judaism, like my religion, my faith group that I was born into, I feel like I'm part of a civilization. I feel like I'm part of a civilization that's thousands of years old, and we have these traditions, we have a language, and we have a culture, and I feel super obligated to pass that on. But nowadays, God has nothing to do with it anymore, to be honest. I feel like my fate in my life. It's bound up with the Jewish people and the state of Israel because that's just how I feel. And it's also historically accurate. Like, my ancestors had a common experience with the 14 million Jews that are around the world. That's just how I feel about it. And in a way, I'm just like a version of a very cultural, not, am a version. I consider myself a cultural Jew because I'm bound up in that civilization. And it really has nothing to do with God. Um, I think that there's something spiritual and mystical and holy that happens when Jewish ritual occurs, like when you're at a Shabbat dinner or you're at a Seder and you're doing a ritual that has Hebrew in it, and you're blessing the wine or the challah or the bread, right? There's something in that is mystical and it's mysterious, and I don't really care to define it whether it's God or not, to be honest with you, right? Because some days I feel like there's something about it that I'm like, wow, God is here, there is a presence right now. And other days I think, you know what, it's a bunch of people together, and when people get together and do something really special, there's an energy in the room. That's kind of like the humanist side of me, right? um, but I didn't ever need to define what God was until I got sober. And that's because, like, in sobriety, for those of you that are listening that know what I'm talking about, like, everything is at stake once you realize you can't drink anymore. Like, for some of us, it's life or death, right? That's how serious, that's how high the stakes are that you can't drink. And that's why you need to believe in something greater than yourself. And it sounded so hokey in the beginning, Christopher, but I was like, this is so culty. I don't really want to believe in anything, let alone do I believe in, like, what is God? And they're like, what do you mean? What do I mean? I don't know what God is. Like, I'm Jewish. I have to, of course, know what God is, right? I'm a Jewish educator. Like, I got a piece of paper from the seminary. I've got to
Yeah,
have this figured out by this point in my life. You know what I mean?
I do.
So I discovered that that being in a group of drunks, sharing their experience, their strength, and their hope, it it lifted the obsession for me to drink, and I found a way to not have to drink anymore. And I was so grateful for that. And I just found holiness and godliness in the rooms of AA, and I really just did. And it really, I found it in a way that I just never found in Judaism. And I don't think of it as unfortunate. I just think of it as like a different room in the house of my life by this point, and I'm totally fine with it. And I really espouse these values that I've arrived at when I'm out there talking to people, because I think, if anything, like, it's like what I'm comfortable with as an adult and as a human being, and as a Jew. And when people hear me, I think they really hear it, and I think it, like, gives them a different perspective on how they see religion and sobriety and things like that. And so, it's not a bad thing. It's just like my path. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Your memoir explores the identity of a young Jewish educator and banjo player navigating New York in the mid 2000s. How do you integrate the messy Matthew who stumbled through faith and too much beer with the Matthew who is now sharing his story and educating others? What lesson does that integration teach you about personal growth?
Uh, what does that teach about personal growth? Huh. Well, I think that, for me personally, it's amusing to look back at my earlier self, right? Um, and there's multiple earlier selves in the book. Like, I wrote most of the book between the ages of 34 and 36, and I'm now 45 when it's coming out, right? So I'm looking at, like, the Matt who wrote the book, who didn't live, you know, through a pandemic, and, like, meeting the woman who would end up being his wife and leaving New York and, like, having a whole other life, right? So there's, like, multiple Matthews like that don't know each other, um, strangely. But to answer your question, um, To answer your question, it's Christopher. It's really just like it's like looking yourself in the eyes and saying like, "This is this is the life that I've lived. Like, what do you think about it?" You know what I mean? And then just having to digest it, I suppose. There's parts of the book that I'll read and I still kind of cringe at. I'm like, oh my God, like what was I thinking? You know what I mean? Um, but it comes back to the humor. It really allows me to kind of like I really find a way to laugh at all of it. And to oh, here's what I'm getting at. Okay, I finally have an answer for you. I finally have an answer, everybody. Don't worry, I'm finally there. I am able to look back on my younger self with compassion and just to say, you know what? You were a young guy, you had a big heart, you were naive, but you tried so hard to be the best person you could be, and you just couldn't stay out of your own way, and you weren't really sure how to handle things, right? Um, and that's really growing up. That just is part of growing up. You just have to figure things out, and things don't work out along the way. And so, if I, that's that, I guess that's the heart of what I'm trying to answer, how I'm trying to answer your question. I would give my younger self a little bit of a break. I mean, I might have a couple of comments about how he handled a couple of things. I might be like, "Did you really have to do that? Did you really have to do this? You might have to blah 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 blah."
But
Right?
if you didn't
But
do that, who would you be today?
no, it's a really great question. I'd be a really boring person. And I probably would be. Actually, let me answer that seriously. I probably would just be somebody who um, really didn't take the type of chances I took to help me to help me like live a life that I live. Like I actually have very few regrets in my life. One of the biggest regrets in my life is that I never didn't play the piano growing up. Like that's really it. Like I'm sure I'm going to think of others when when we're finished, but um I look at a lot of my failure ironically now so many years later as a blessing and actually was an opportunity for me to grow and to become a better adult in the world and to show up for people in my life. Right. But the mythology that we have to smash, I think, for all of us that are, if you're listening to me, is that those lessons never end. And when one battle is finished, another one begins. And you often have to reface a lot of the challenges that they might always plague you. Like I continue to bump into things and crises and challenges that still make me feel like I'm 25 again. You know what I mean? Um,
Mhm.
but the difference now at 45, and I remember hearing older people say this and thinking like, okay, whatever. But now I actually feel it in my bones. Like I know myself. I know how I react to things. I have this like meta awareness of like, oh, Matt, like I know exactly. Like, did you really have to say that? Right? Like, I don't think I had that inside of me when I was 25. I wasn't like I didn't like go home from work that day being like, why did I do that? Like I just moved on because I was a
Yeah,
blank slate, right? And so I have um that going for me now,
there you go.
decades later. You know,
For many creatives, there's a romanticized myth that drugs and alcohol fuels genius or unlocks creativity. Did you ever buy into that? And if so, what was the sobering reality of separating your creative identity from your drinking habit?
right? Oh, I mean, of course, I was a deadhead in high school, of course. And I was obsessed with the 1960s. Loved classic rock. And so, partying and music always went hand in hand to me growing up. And the mythology of like, substance of drugs and alcohol and playing music and it all, and screwing it all up and dying young, I bought into all of it. And I thought it all went hand in hand nicely. Right. Um, And to be honest with you, it's kind of ironic. When I got sober, I wasn't exactly sure how I learned how to play the banjo or write songs because I had been drunk for so many years. But I somehow did. You know, I When I was a young man, I was a very regimented and disciplined, even with all of the drinking, to teach myself how to play an instrument. And it wasn't like nowadays where there's YouTube. Like you had to like sit with books, you know?
Mhm.
There wasn't
Mhm.
there really it was a very different way of learning music a long time ago. Like I mean I had CDs and stuff. I mean I remember reading some like banjo textbooks where people would like it was telling you to slow down your record player and tune down your banjo because because it was going to make the key lower, which I think is amazing that people used to do that. Um, but anyway, I am going on a tangent here. So I have a very clear. I actually have this really clear memory, Christopher, of this one time where I was working on a song in my apartment in Manhattan, and I was like on my third glass of wine, and I started to get a little tired. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't really need to have another glass. Like, it's really kind of getting in the way of me working on this. I couldn't even strum. I was so tired. And I had another glass of wine anyway. And then I passed out. And it's kind of like a metaphor for a lot of like playing and writing music in the last couple years of drinking. Like the drinking just really got in the way of everything. And any skill I might have learned as a musician when I was a younger man was really just blocked by drinking all the time. And what's ironic is when I got sober, I remember like the first thing I thought to myself was like, how am I going to play music ever again? Like all I like I can't be an artist if I don't drink. I had that in the back of my mind, right? I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to really play. My life as a musician is over, right? Uh 3 months into my sobriety, I played banjo on a stage on New Year's Eve in front of 1,500 people, totally sober. I got asked to play at this gig. I played like 3 songs and I killed it. I played so well. I remember thinking after that night, I'm like, I don't need to drink ever again to play music. Like that was stupid for me to even think that. And I've written, recorded, produced, and performed the best music of my life since I quit drinking. You know what I mean? So the mythology was smashed very early on. That moment where I played in front of those people, it was in London at this conference on New Year's Eve in 2015, I guess. A lot of mythologies get smashed in sobriety. Another big one was like I'll never be able to travel and enjoy myself again without drinking. I've seen more of the world in sobriety than I ever saw when I drank. You know, um, but with the creative side, that's kind of a really happy ending. Like I really found my creativity after I quit drinking. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
Indeed. What part of your life or your internal landscape were you most afraid of confronting when you use alcohol to mute the world? And how do you now deal with the quiet, the anxiety or discomfort that used to drive you to drink?
well, well, right now I'm not the most spiritually fit person. I got to be honest. It's like these effing devices, man. Like I'm on my phone all day. It's like so not healthy. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm in this constant state of telling myself I got to get back to basics. I got to get back to basics. I got to get back to basics. So there's like a couple things that I do that I actually think really center me, and this is besides for going to AA, right? Like I first of all, this is really silly, but I actually think this really centers me. I have a dog. I love him. He's like my pride and joy. Aside from my wife, who I love very much, and she's, the most important thing, but right below her is my dog. And I tell you, I get home from work and I walk him. I couldn't be happier. I just walking my dog down by the river. I live in Cincinnati. I live on the Ohio River in downtown Cincinnati. I couldn't be happier. And it just resets my day. And it just reminds me that, like, I mean, work is important and bills need to get paid. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is like, your wife, your family, and the people you love, and your dog. Your dog reminds you of how like amazing the world is. It's kind of funny, but it's so silly, and it's so simple, and it's super real to me. So that's one thing. Another thing is I love to get up first thing in the morning. I'm really old fashioned. The first thing I do in the morning is I read a book for a half hour, no matter what. I get up, make myself a nice strong cup of coffee. I sit down on the couch. I don't even look at my phone, and I just read like an actual book. Um, and I love that. I really do, and it just centers me, and it makes me feel good about myself because I loved reading growing up, and it's one thing that I've always kind of held on to, so to
Right.
speak. Yeah. Um, but let me answer your other question. What did I mask with the drinking? What was I trying to hide? What was the pain? I think one of the deepest seated pieces of my pain was not being the person that my father wanted me to be. And I write about this in the book. Um, Now, it sounds really heavy and dramatic when I say it that way, or almost like tragic, but I don't really see it that way because, like, I think a lot of people struggle with like not being what their parents wanted them to be, so to speak. And the life that I've chosen and the things that I've done with my life, my parents are proud of me anyway, actually. Right. I just ended up not being what they thought they were expecting their son to be. Um, and I really think many years later, I think that the drinking and the anxiety of me as a young man really was fueled by this anxiety all the time that I wasn't living the life that I was supposed to be living, and I always felt guilt and shame about it, right? And sometimes I still feel that way. And but like I was saying earlier, it's like I have this meta awareness of myself now. I say to myself, Matt, like, why are you feeling like you've done something wrong? You're just living your life. You're not doing anything wrong. Like everything is fine, right? And it's really hard to get rid of that feeling sometimes. And so that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now, actually. Like in moments where I feel that way and I realize that there's nothing wrong and everything is fine and I'm just living my life and I'm not, and like, why might I feel that way? And I know it's tied back to the younger version of me dealing with anxiety around not being the person I was supposed to be. Yeah.
Indeed. Your title, What Would Philip Roth Do, suggests seeking guidance from a figure known for grappling with complicated, messy truths. What specific Rothian wisdom or lesson about human imperfection did you ultimately find during your journey?
Well, for those of you that are listening and have read some Philip Roth in their lives, you might know that, there's a lot of like, don't do it, don't do it this way that you might get from some of his protagonists, right? Um, you might get that. You might get like, maybe you do it this other way, right? Because a lot of them are very bawdy and irreverent and flawed individuals and like broken relationships. And I would argue a little bit of misogyny in there too, right? Um, but a lot of really funny, raw, um, Jewish old school humor that I really identified with. Like I've talked about this in other interviews, and I kind of feel like I was almost talking to like an uncle, like my grandmother's like brother, so to speak. So what is the wisdom in Roth? I really think the wisdom in Roth is like finding a way and finding a way to like to write about your life in a way that's like really revealing, but it's authentic in a way where it allows the reader to identify with what you're going through. I think that that's what I was shooting for, to be honest. Um, the title of the book, What Would Philip Roth Do? It's an homage to the way that he would write stories because they were so revealing. And what's crazy is like they were fiction, but they were so like real and authentic that you felt like he was like basically writing his life story for you. And there was a lot of biographical stuff in his books, but it was fiction. You know what I mean? And so the inspiration for me from the way that he wrote was to do that, was to write from a place of authenticity. Um, and in addition to that, the subject matter, the things that he spoke about, they were really like they were like so taboo, before he wrote about them. And just the fact that he laid it out there, it really gave me the courage to write about those subjects too, because like all of the subject matter that he writes about in his literature, especially his early literature, like from Portnoy and the Zuckerman books, It all happened to me in my life. So like, even though he was like writing fiction about it, I was like, well, that actually like happened to me. So a lot of like the situations he found himself in, his relationships, and being Jewish, and just living life in New York City, and some of his escapades and his other books in like Europe and Israel and stuff. So just having him as like uh this imagined self that I could bounce myself off of, that allowed me to really dig into my story, write that story. Yeah.
Indeed. Did your relationship with alcohol have any roots in family or generational patterns? And if so, what was involved in breaking that cycle? And what does that mean for how you approach relationships today?
Wow, it's a great question. I don't really think, at least in my immediate family, I'm the only one who really overdid it. Right. Like we drank, there were drinkers in our family. Um, but as far as I could tell, I'm the only one that got it, so to speak. Um, and I would say it wasn't difficult for my family in the beginning, but I think that like I think that I think that they might have thought I was like being a little dramatic. They're like, well, maybe he's not an alcoholic. He's just like, he needs to chill out and like not party as much. You know what I mean? But they also didn't see how I was acting. You know what I mean? Um, and nowadays, with regard to relationships in my life and, the next generation, as you say, we don't have kids. So it's not about my like actual children, so to speak, but I work with kids. I'm a teacher, and I'm an educator. I'm very open about my sobriety, Christopher. Um, it's actually really nice in the day and age that we live in. You don't have to really hide these things. I feel like even like 15, 20 years ago, it would be super taboo to be so open about being sober and talking about your story. But I find that owning my story and being open about my sobriety, it it really it allows me to model how it is to be a sober man in society. And that's the biggest way I could really be a teacher about, if people are curious about like not drinking as much, or maybe they might have a problem and they're not quite sure. Um, and I love doing that. It allows me to actually allows me just to like be of service just by, being super open about who I am. Yeah.
Indeed. Matt, if you could go back to the version of yourself who was facing that mountain of toilet paper full of shame and regret, and you could give him one word that summarizes everything you know about healing and life on the other side, not sober, not forgive, but one deep concept, what would that word be and why?
One word, that's it. Okay.
Let's say
Patience.
statement. Word is kind of
Yeah,
tight.
yeah.
Statement, yeah.
Well,
Word.
I'll do it. Patience.
Mm,
Like wait, like don't do anything. Like just chill out, take a breath, go to sleep, wake up in the morning. Like I am so impulsive. I'm still impulsive. Like I have the impulse to be impulsive. If such a phrase is like usable, right? Because I was the epitome of impulse when I was younger, and that's really in the book. You'll see a bunch of stuff in the book, and I'll just give this away. Maybe this will, if you're listening, maybe this will entice you to buy the book. After a fight with my girlfriend, and I bought a plane ticket to fly to Morocco in a blackout. I was just like, you know what, fuck, I'm going to Morocco, and I just did it. And it had to do it. There's a reason why Morocco was the place that I went to, and why you're gonna have to buy the book to understand that part of the story. But impulse, Christopher. That I would say that patience is one word I would tell my younger self. Yeah.
indeed, indeed. Patience. I like that. So you can get your book. It's available on Amazon.
Yes.
How many? I mean, what would you want to tell them about the book to entice them to go to Amazon, as many people have banned it as of late, in order to, what would they gain from buying this book? What do you hope to inspire by them reading such a novel?
Well, I would like to think that I would like to think that it's refreshing to read a story where somebody is just so authentic and puts their life out there for people to read. You know what I mean? I hope that people identify with it. I think that a lot of people have stories of disappointment and challenges when they're, adulting, when they're in their first decade of being an actual adult out there in the world. Um, I don't think my story is that uncommon, and I think that's why people might like it. I don't have, by the way, I don't have like I can't even say that I struggled. Like that would be silly. Like I had a, I still had a really nice job and I lived a really fun life. You know what I mean? When I was younger, so it was not like I lived like this life of difficulty. It definitely was a life of privilege compared to some, right? But even within that, challenges, disappointment, things not working out, job security, relationships not working, addiction, right? Like you still experience all of that, even with like a white collar job where you make a great salary and you live in Manhattan, right? I think a lot of people identify with it because a lot of people move to New York and things just don't work out when you're in your 20s, right? And you have to like find a way to like, make some sense of it. And so just to come full circle with your question, I really just kind of hope that people identify with the humor and they can laugh with me and they can cry with me. And, maybe it'll even inspire you to do a little bit of writing about your own life. That would be kind of cool, if anything. Of course, I'd love for you to buy the book too. I put so much time into it, so it'd be nice to feel good that way. But that's secondary. I've had some really great reviews so far. Uh, some friends have reached out to me on Instagram and also just like texting me, and it's been really nice to see. I haven't had one bad review yet, to be honest with you, and some really nice. I had one friend say to me, "You know what? I never thought you were a great songwriter at all, but you're a good writer, so keep writing." A little bit of a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it.
Hey, that's a good. That at least he kept it real. That means he's a true friend.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Yeah, I guess so.
All right,
Yeah.
that's what's up. I'm definitely going to be looking into it myself. Well, that was an incredibly honest and inspiring conversation with Matthew Check. Thank you, Matt, for reminding
Thank
us
you.
that the deepest lessons are often found right in the middle of our mess, and that humor truly can be a bridge to acceptance. If you connected with Matt's journey, the complicated relationship with alcohol, the search for clarity, and finding healing through art, you absolutely need to read his memoir, What Would Philip Roth Do? It's a raw, funny, and deeply personal look at finding purpose amidst the chaos, and you can find it and purchase it easily on Amazon. To keep up with Matthew's music, writing, and future projects, you can find him on his website, MatthewCheckMusic.com, on LinkedIn by his name, Matthew Check, and on Instagram at Matthew Check, no space. We'll link all of these resources along with Matthew's top tips. Own your mess, laugh through the wreckage, and create your way out in the show notes. Thank you for tuning into the Modern Therapy Podcast, where you can find wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone you know who might be needing a little dose of humor and hope on their healing journey. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the human experience. Until then, keep doing the work. Be well, be great. Thank you, Matthew, for your appearance on the More Than Therapy podcast.
And thank you. Thanks for having me.
Be well and continue to be great.